Here to talk about Research and Engineering Studio on AWS. I came straight from the airport, so I'm a little less enthusiastic than I usually am. It is not because of the subject matter. I'm going to be going over and talking about Research and Engineering Studio. I was, of course, bit by the curse of the live demo, and my actual environment is not working, and it is a Active Directory problem, not an AWS problem. So it would have been probably too long for the time we had anyway. But if people are interested in seeing it live and clicking around in it, I can do that at a later date online. People can join. But here to tell you what it is. And of course, as always, feel free to blurt out any questions, interrupt, all that stuff. Okay, without further ado, if PowerPoint will let me change slide. Unnecessary animation. There we go. So innovation blockers in research and engineering. This is all stuff you already know. But one of them is collaboration, especially in this post-pandemic world where people just don't get together in the same room very often anymore. But it's always been a thing in higher ed because you're usually collaborating with, if not people in other universities, and maybe people on the other side of the planet. So this is common. IT complexity, and if you don't have your own IT skill set, or you don't have the support of a full IT staff, and in research, that's not typical usually, that you have a full IT staff at your disposal, then it can be, you just want to get your science done. You want to get the things you need to do done, and administrative overhead, keep it to an absolute minimum. And you're doing complicated stuff, so it's not simple IT either. And then scaling. So fixed compute resources. Now, this is generically AWS, solving this problem here, where, yeah, you may have been able to buy a big, loud, metal, sharp box you have to put in a loud, cold room, but that's it. That's what you get. And if you either have more data than you thought you did, or you want to do more, or your experiment gets extended, then you've reached the peak. Or on the flip side, you have bought too much or bought the wrong thing, and you can't scale down. But even if you're not using it, you already bought it, you own it, and it could just be sitting there idle. And there's the other thing of, and this is not specific to Research and Engineering Studio, but let's say you buy a bunch of GPUs. Well, you own them, but yes, in a year and a half, you have a year and a half old GPU. And NVIDIA has probably released 15,000 new ones since that time span. So with AWS, you can get the latest technology, but it's not always easy. It's straightforward if you're used to dealing with IT infrastructure, you're used to dealing with managing virtual machines, and more importantly, managing the people who are using those virtual machines. That's really where the big lift is. And that's taking time and resources away from your actual job, which is doing your research or teaching. So that's why we're trying to ease this transition. Now, the notes have a whole bunch of marketing stuff about some Hackett group study, but really, I'm not going to bore anyone to tears with that. But the whole idea of empowering scientists to do it on their own is, one, so they can get all the advantages that we've been talking about, and they don't have to hire someone just to take care of the systems, and you don't have to spend a million years trying to get everything up and running so you can run your experiment. So minimizing administrative overhead. So you'll see later, you can do things like setting permissions, which is kind of the base layer. You have to have that. You don't want to say, oh, okay, well, everybody's got root access to this. That's terrible. Please don't do that. And then you have the second most important thing after security is budget, which you can do all this stuff in AWS. And this is probably a good time to point out that while it's not on the slides, Research and Engineering Studio, I may have led with this, honestly, isn't specifically a service in itself. It is a coordination suite of tools to make it easy to use things that already exist, but aren't straightforward for non-IT people to use. And it's not comprehensive. It's like, okay, well, I want to run a high performance compute cluster. Well, great. You need to understand EC2, which is our virtual machines. You need to understand VPC, which is our networking infrastructure. You need to understand IAM, which is identity and access management. You need to understand whatever storage you use, whether that's an object storage with S3 and or adding a file system. How are these all going to talk to each other? Then great, I have it all up. How am I going to get people to use it, right? Am I handing out SSH keys? Am I going to manage these people as people come on and go off? How am I going to expand and contract this when I'm not using it? I don't want to spend money. You can do all this, but there wasn't a fence around it to say, here's some tools to help you do all of this easily. And that's why we came up with this. So while it is not a service in itself, it is a management tool for existing service. Yeah, engineering teams through a single interface, like basically what I just said. No cloud expertise required. I mean, yeah, some, but it's not like you have to be writing route tables yourself. I like that. You probably don't. So it's all about time to science. That's the whole point. So flexible access to services. So create virtual desktops. We have well over 200 different EC2 instance types. An EC2 instance is a single virtual machine. The instance type is the hardware. So the amount of CPU and RAM available to it, and if there's any hardware accelerated specialized chips such as a GPU or some of the ASICs we have, or even FPGAs, all of that is at your disposal, and Res is trying to make it easy to use that. This is kind of an unnecessary slide, other than, kind of to wave the flag. You guys are on the slide. Oh, you do manufacture too? Oh, okay.
You don't know that.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I started my career at interning in an R&D lab at a manufacturing company, and yeah, it's like herding cats, except these cats have access to giant sheet metal punches. Anyway, way off topic. And Res addresses things like poor performance for VDI, which is virtual desktop infrastructure. That's what VDI means. So poor performance for VDI users and long queue times can hurt operational efficiency. So integration of siloed systems and operational overhead of managing them slow the delivery of new capabilities to your institution. While you can, and we even have our own VDI products, such as Amazon Workspaces and Amazon AppStream, it's not necessarily the best fit for this kind of use case, for research, for an R&D engineering group, things of that nature, where you may be scaling up, you may be scaling down, you need a different kind of access, but you still want remote desktops, right? Not traditional, I'm going to replace the generic Dell desktops on everybody in the accounting department, right? We're going to put them on workspaces. So that wasn't always the best fit for research and for higher ed. Res is going to help that problem. When we get in a little bit more into the weeds of what it is doing on the VDI front, well, I'll say how we're doing that. But this graphic, I would use my layers on that. Encapsulate Res visually pretty well. So remote desktop, HPC simulation and modeling, applications like database security stuff, and infrastructure code, which is cloud formation. So this is all built on CloudFormation. That's how you deploy it. So you can make a change in the infrastructure code and deploy it like that instead of what we call click ops, which is going through the web console and launching everything manually. A bunch of unnecessary animation. Okay. So easily, like it says here, easily manage, deploy, and run cloud-based research and engineering environments. That's the whole point of this. Now, once Res is spun up, there is an identity element to it. Now, you have always been able to integrate an identity source into AWS via single sign-on using SAML or other options here. But it's not straightforward, and it's more for like an enterprise IT kind of setup. But you need something like that in a research group just at a smaller scale, right? And you don't necessarily want to integrate UW Net ID with your AWS account for your lab, right? That is one overkill and probably not security best practice. But at the same time, you want the benefits of being able to hand out a username and password to someone, and they can go in and remote connect to all the different servers that they're allowed to, and then delegate to, okay, well, there's someone else in my group, in my department, who should be handling this. So you can have sysadmins, you can have the users of those resources, and you can manage them in an easier way than handing out SSH keys, handing out individual passwords for individual users on Windows servers, and then managing everybody's identity and access management credentials so they can go into the AWS console to launch stuff. This way, if you give someone, if I give Jeff the rights to do so, he can go in to the Research Engineering Studio front page and launch a server on his own. I didn't have to give him a bunch of IAM rights to do it. If you've not used IAM, then you probably don't understand how difficult it can be at times. It is very, very powerful, but like all things where you can get very fine-grained and complex, it's difficult. The difficulty rises with the options. So this way, and I don't think it actually says in the slide, but what this is going to do is launch in Microsoft Active Directory user store. So you can have identities that will work across multiple servers. So then you don't have to log into each of your EC2 instances. If you have, let's say, your lab uses 3 or 4 of them, you don't have to log into each one and give people a user and a password on that server, then do it again on the next one, do it again on the next one. They log in much like you would in an institutional identity system where I'm not sure about anyone in this room or online, but if you're in an office and you turn on your computer, you have a username and password, it logs in, right? It would do that if you logged into someone else's computer too. Same username and password. All right. So Res features. I don't like reading slides, but this is, rather than summarize it, I will go through it. So this, once again, broad range of infrastructure and services that it's coordinating for you, so you don't have to do it manually. But the big sell is the web-based user interface to manage access to resources and data at a project level. So even if you're doing multiple projects, you can still have one interface for it. Say, all right, well, these people have access to these resources for project A. These people have access to resources in project B, but we're all using the same identity system, right? Because eventually it all comes under the same umbrella. And collaboration. So then this way, if you're working with a researcher at another institution or even in industry, you can grant access to these resources easily so they can do what they need to do or read the results or send you data. Integrating with existing identity management infrastructure. So AWS Managed Active Directory. This way, AWS Managed Active Directory is an existing service where you don't have to handle the care and feeding of Active Directory servers. It's going to spin it up for you, and then you simply add and remove users. Yeah, security, governance, and compliance. is built in. When we deploy these things, deploying them with security best practices, and that kind of goes hand in hand with infrastructure as code. And then the really important thing here is monitor and manage costs for the project. So while you can do that now, you can tag all your resources and then make budgets and then go as far as to like visualize it in QuickSight and all sorts of stuff. That does take work. This simplifies it. When you're launching Res, you can say, well, this is my budget, and it automates some of the setup for you.
So rather than app that I install,
It's CloudFormation template.
so I don't actually install anything?
You don't install anything.
Okay.
Yep.
But it behaves like a console.
Yes, you'll see. I've got a screenshot here. For the VDI specific of how your remote desktop into these things, it's using nice DCV, which is later on the slide.
Okay, I'll let you speak quietly.
So this is kind of the splash page, what it looks like. Accessing multiple workspaces via virtual desktops. You can submit jobs to high performance computing clusters via the VDI. So while you may have some persistent machines that are always up, you probably don't want your high performance compute cluster up all the time. This way you can have a persistent EC2 instance to connect to the head node of a parallel cluster. And you can connect to it through VDI. It makes it easier to get to it. So while if you use parallel cluster, it's not strictly super integrated with this, but this has ease of access to do that, to start up parallel cluster. And then cost of monitoring. Okay. So manage remote desktops. So you connect to the customizable web UI. On the web UI, you manage your entire environment, view analytics, add users, launch workstations, monitor jobs, budget info, and more. You can dynamically provision workstations with nice DCV with GPU and OS of your choice. So nice DCV is a desktop streaming protocol that is super lightweight. We acquired a company many years ago who did a remote. Their whole thing was they made a product that did remote desktops for supercomputers for data visualization and supercomputer cluster management. We acquired them many years ago. We've been iterating it ever since. The nice DCV is much lighter than something like well, yeah, sorry, I was about to sneeze. Yeah, much better than I wasn't pausing to think, but yes, thank you for X11. X11 is ancient, is probably older than many of the people on the call. There goes again. Okay. I know, I wish it would either just happen or not. Or RDP. Yeah. Or VNC. VNC, while open source and easy to use, is really very heavyweight and it's not very fast. But nice DCV is. It is very fast. It's only sending basically a map of changed pixels. It's not really sending any data in the strict sense, and you're only sending any keystroke and mouse position. So unlike even Teradici's PCOIP, which is itself pretty lightweight, nice DCV beats it pretty well. And I know this because Workspaces started out with Teradici's PCOIP. I'm getting way in the weeds, but I'm just going to go with it. It started with that protocol, and I benchmarked it myself against when we rolled out our iteration of nice DCV, and it was visually noticeably faster. And we've been.
Nice DCV is going to give you a desktop.
Yep.
And nice DCV is running on my computer.
Yep. You can do it.
Did I have to install something?
No, you can. That's the trick. So I'll skip ahead a few slides and then we'll go back. this is what you're presented with when you log into the web portal. So you're going to have a username and password. You'll log in, depending on if you've been deemed an administrator or a user. That determines what you can do on these, and you've been assigned which. These are all the EC2 instances. And in those, like CentOS, my desktop, all of these EC2 instances, they're currently, well, they don't have to run. And if you click action, or just hit connect up there, it's going to do it right in the web browser, and it's using the nice BCD protocol. If you click BCD session file and download it, you can install the full client on your laptop and use it outside of the website. I'm struggling to think of specifically what advantage there would be. I think you could have more monitors if you download the full client. But there's some other benefits that.
Okay, so there's something I could install, but the baseline idea is I'm just going to use in the browser.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
Yeah, and even if you're doing 3D rendering or 3D visualizations or something, it still is fast enough that it works well for that. So let me go over the diagram here. So the blue is the region, the geographical space where AWS has resources. The VPC, virtual private cloud, this is the network infrastructure of AWS. This is where things live. We have a public subnet, private subnet. Public subnet really just means it has access to an internet gateway. It can get out to the internet. And in there, we have an application load balancer and a network load balancer, which are exactly what they sound like. The load balancer, you connect to it, and then it distributes that network traffic to things on the other side of it. So this is what we're deploying here with Rez. You have remote desktops. Nice DCD has a couple of these instances that are brokers for the big multi-user environments. And then the fleet, you have those are your actual servers. Rez also deploys, it doesn't deploy, but one of the prerequisites for deploying it is EFS, our file system. So then all of your servers can have a shared file system between. Now, you are not forced to use that, but you can use flexible luster, you can use EVS volume on the server themselves, you can, but it's a built-in, nice to have, doesn't really cost you anything if you don't use it. Yes.
Are the broker and gateway just running on standard EC2 instances?
Yeah.
Okay. What size EC2 instance do you guys?
I have to look at the template to see what it deploys. You don't have to pick it. Yeah. They're
Get a sense of like the standing cost of the system.
yes, this is deploying Rez and not running anything is about $20 a day. Yep. I asked that exact same question. So all of the stuff that it launches, the load balancers, the brokers, the nice DCV brokers, it does add up even if it's not running, but
So do I spend $20 on Saturday?
yes. Yeah, you give it directly to me and so then if you wanted to so users access the highly available web front end. As you saw, we had a load balancer. So it's always, if something goes bad with one of the nodes in the background that's serving up this web front end, it will automatically heal itself. So from any geography, you can receive real-time analytics and budget and launch. In the notes, it keeps saying workstations, but you're launching EC2 instances. We automate dynamic provisioning of desktops with any EC2 instance type. It's not, we don't restrict you on what types you're launching. And yeah, I already talked about NiceCTV. Self-service via the web UI, so you can click stop. Then when you're done for the day, you can turn it off, so it's not charging you anything for it. As opposed to having to, the traditional way would be setting someone up with IAM rights to be able to start EC2 instances. Because if you have OS level access, you can shut it down, but you wouldn't be able to turn it back on. With this, you can. And what we've added to the diagram here is AWS Parallel Cluster, which is another existing project that will launch a head node and compute nodes, and you will install a scheduler of your choice. Almost everybody's using Slurm these days, but you can pick Slurm or Sport or I think SunGrid engines in there. Anyway, you've always been able to do that, but it makes it slightly easier to then get to the head node to launch your systems via the web interface of Res. You go to the web interface of Res, you can see, oh, okay, well, here's my workstation where I can access into the head node parallel cluster. Then parallel cluster, you submit your job, and it will send up the resources it needs to run your job and then scale it. Now, that's all self-contained, but the advantage of using it with Res is one, getting to it instead of having to have the key on your local laptop to SSH into the head node, like you would the standalone EC2 instance. That's what it is. You can do it through Res, through a virtual laptop. So then it doesn't matter where you're coming back to your home with a different machine, you can still log into the web portal, which can then get you to the system you need to launch parallel. And there's going to be, I know it's a vague statement. They are iterating on this, and there's going to be more integration directly with Parallel Cluster in the future. So, I'm hoping to see more push button cluster launches, but we're not there yet. This is we did.
Not, it has to be big and red, like the immediate launch.
Yes, with the flip up lid.
Well,
Yeah.
you have to have two, one for launch, which is green, and one for shutdown, which is red.
Yeah.
Just like in the labs.
Yeah. Yeah.
People pretty good. The attribution is fun.
I did pre-AWS, I worked for a company where I was migrating a data center and shut it down. I got to hit the EPO, the emergency power off button, the big candy-like button.
That's what I was alluding to.
And
you need one of those.
I got to hit it.
Just because it's the cloud doesn't mean it's any different.
Exactly.
You need the full experience. Right?
But, in the early days of, this is right about when Lambda came out, we had the IoT, the AWS IoT button, which was just a button that would essentially send a message to an SQS queue, right? It was a physical device you could buy on Amazon.com. You have a couple?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't get to work because UWIT had a MAC address registration process
Oh, yeah.
that I ran afoul of and we worked on.
Well, I gotta,
Like,
light blue one, yeah. They should still work. We don't sell them anymore. There you go. Well,
happened.
when you could actually do exactly that with one of those. And in fact, when those came out, my jackass coworker, the first thing he did within the first half hour of it arriving was make it so every time he pushed it, it paged me.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Not the same guy, but this guy would have done it too. Anyway, this is what you get when you log into Res. These are servers that you have launched or that you have access to, and they can be for completely different projects. They could be all for the same project. It can be assigned one-to-one, like this is mine, this is Rob's, this is Naomi's, this is Jeff's. Or it could be, oh, this is a collaborative workspace, so everybody can log into each one of these. But yeah, you can share sessions, and you can even if someone is logged into it, you can, as the admin, log into it too, and basically shadow them and say, hey, click here, click here, click here, which is pretty cool. And scheduling auto shutdown. So if you say, I don't want anyone working on this stuff over the weekend or at night, you can schedule shutdowns. Which without res, you would have to like create an action in CloudWatch event and all that sort of stuff. Yes. So if you look at this great stock photo here, you can download the res source code, which is on GitHub. And by source code, it's really a CloudFormation template. In the documentation is really very good. The documentation is in our standard documentation pages. You don't have to read it on GitHub. There are you need pre-existing resources, a couple of them, that res does not launch for you by default. And that's an Active Directory system with AWS managed Active Directory and EFS, and it has to have an existing VPC within which to place the items. Now, there is another CloudFormation template that if you are experimenting and you're playing around with this, will launch the things you need to be pre-existing in order to use res. So there's a CloudFormation template for testing purposes that will launch a VPC, that will launch managed Active Directory, that will launch EFS. So then when you launch res, all that's ready to go. You wouldn't do that in production, but it's a nice to have so you can play around and then tear it all down. So yeah, another diagram using our different icons, but then you can see here like the UID, the email, the role. Okay, I can see this user is currently active, they're enabled, they're in these groups, and this was their last one, right? So you can very easily enable and disable users as people come and go in your lab, as opposed to having to go into IAM and things like that. It can all be done without having to go into Active Directory, users and computers tool, ADUC. If anybody's ever used that, that's not that it's hard, but you have to spin up a Windows box. You have to install all of those services. You have to then connect to the domain, the whole thing. So you can create projects, assign permissions and budgets.
What happens if somebody reaches their budget?
The same thing that happens in your regular environment is it does. You get a notice. You get a notice. Yeah. It doesn't do anything but alert you. Yeah. And here's where you can define a project. So if you are running res with for multiple projects that may be unrelated, you can separate them by creating a different project. They could have different users and permissions, different budgets. Here we go. This is just kind of more what it looks like when you're setting up these projects. You can use your own domain name too. So if you have a domain registered in, well, it doesn't have to be in Route 53. It's easier if it's in Route 53, but otherwise it's going to create basically just an IP address for you, or it's going to create a domain for you. But if you already own a domain name, an internet routable domain name, you can use that in res. It's one of the fields to fill in when you're launching it. Just another view of these are the desktops I have access to. You can then update permissions for people inside or outside your organization because this is a self-contained identity store. I mean, you could connect this to like something like NetID, but That's not the best use case. You can add a user who may have nothing to do with the University of Washington, but they're someone you're collaborating with. You have the freedom to add them to your directory and then grant them access to the shared desktops they need access to.
Does it support the factor?
It does not. Because it's AD based, you'd have to have a radius server. Yeah, it doesn't do that yet. Though I will put that in as a feature request
Yeah,
if it's not already there. So
yeah. You can-
YubiKeys, yes, YubiKeys, yeah. None of that RSA token stuff from the old days that immediately would get scratched and you can't rerun the numbers. Not that that's ever happened to me. And then this is budgeting. Now, this is all stuff that you could see if you look at your bill in Cost Explorer through the AWS console. But it's looking at the things that have been tagged by Res as part of your project that you didn't have to manually tag yourself. It's just going to do it. And it's showing you all of these metrics of your budget and other things of your projects directly into Revit. So you don't have to go to Cost Explorer in your AWS account. Like here, you can see summary of all virtual desktop sessions by project code. Get there. Base OS, how many sessions, instance types. There's 19 sessions, and this is how many M6A larges, how many of your instances stopped and started. Your actual spend for the budget. Like limit is, let's see, $5,000. Your forecasted spend, 2,942. All things that you could do, but now is more convenient and easy to access. So Res itself, you're paying for the resources it launches, not for Res. So it doesn't cost, Res itself doesn't cost anything. The things it launches, like I mentioned earlier, if it's idle, you have all the pieces there. You can use Res to start up resources in your AWS account. If it's just sitting there, it's about $20 a day worth of usage. And then on top of that, whatever you launch through Res is going to cost what it's going to cost, right? It is supported, so you can talk to AWS support about it. So if you call them up and say, hey, I've got Res, you will eventually get routed to someone who can help you with it. It's not like, no, sorry, that's, it's an open source project. It's not officially supported. This is officially supported. And that was it. Okay, questions? I see there's the chat has I can't get to the chat. Is there anything in the chat? Yeah, I don't know.
Asks, is this for scientists and engineers or physical specialists and project managers?
Yes. Yes, it is. This is made for scientists and engineers, and it's to help them with the physical process. Yep.
So it's intended to be deployed by scientists and engineers?
Yep. Yep. The whole point is to try and make this so if you don't have access to a full IT group yourself, you can get what you need up and running to do your work quickly. You will need to, one, be able to launch the things that Res needs before you can launch Res. So you'll need to know how to do that. And you'll need to know how to launch a confirmation template, but that's all in the instructions. If you want to use this and you're struggling with getting those prerequisites, like making a VPC, which is, there's a wizard now, it's really pretty good. Or launching manage Active Directory, call me. I'll do that.
Literally?
Literally, yes. I'll give you my, yeah,
Maybe not while it's recorded.
not while it's recording.
Well, you
Yeah.
said anybody, you called me, so
Yeah.
I thought you would want it actually to be public. I'm just saying.
Yeah, you absolutely can. Yeah, I'll give you my work number.
So, sorry,
No, please.
I have a question. Suppose that I'm a scientist, I get into the system, and I make a guess as to the kind of machine that I'm using. When I set up that machine to have an automatic check engine every day at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then is there a pathway for me to evaluate that I guess the right size machine, like I'm consistently using the 80% usage, or did I overshoot or did I undershoot and should I restart? So is that kind of thing supported?
Yep. Yeah, it's basically, this is just graphing CloudWatch metrics. And it can tell you uptime, like how often you're using it, CPU utilization, things like that. You can, of course, always go, I mean, you're familiar enough with CloudWatch, you could go right into CloudWatch and see things tagged with your project tag that you set up in Res, see it directly, but most of that is right there already in the limit. And on that note, you can also use your own AMIs. So it's not like we have a preset of, okay, well, anything you launch in Res, like these machines here are a handful of options, OS options. They're not. It's, yes, you can use the stock AMIs. You can bring your own AMI. You can launch one, configure it, create your own AMI, and then launch from that. The sign-on experience, while there weirdly is not an image of it in here, is very similar to any other SSO SAML-based login. You go to the web page, it shows you, oh, here's my Res deployment. I click there and it logs you in. Like we have more chat. Oh, there's my mouse cursor. Of course, puts it over there.
Using that for documentation.
And using Res as their documentation about the security component compliance, like with NIST or FedRAMP. No, once again, this is just kind of creating an environment. If you need to meet those kind of standards, you can, of course, do that by making sure your VPC where this is going to live meets those specs and other things of that nature. Res does not have anything in it that it says launch this as a NIST compatible environment. It's not good. That's not what it's for. You can't do that. Landing Zone Accelerator, on the other hand, is for that. Okay, any other questions about this? And like I said, if I one hadn't been at a conference all week, and two, this had broken 2 days ago instead of today, then I would have showed you a live demo of it. But I can do that in the future, and we don't have to have a big in-person event like this. It won't be necessary, but I'll work with you two to get like a half hour, 45-minute session of just showing them what it looks like.